I wrong for telling the truth about my best friend at her wedding. Story time. So my best friend, who we will call Amy, got married last week. Me and my partner Steve both just bought a house. I'm also expecting our son in January. So when I was asked to be maid of honour by Amy, I let her know that I would be extremely limited on what I could do, especially financially, because obviously we have a lot going on at the minute. But of course, I said that I would try my best. So we had the hen party. It was really, really fun. And then I also paid for mine and my partner's dinner at the meal prep. What's it called? Rehearsal dinner. And we also had a gift of £300, which we were going to give as well, but I'll tell you why I didn't give that later. So I was really enjoying the maid of honour duties until I started to get loads of random texts from her husband, who we'll call Dave. And towards the wedding day, it started to get, oh my god, there was so many. You know, because I'm like pregnant and I've just bought a house, I didn't always respond to him. And then if I didn't respond to him, I would get a call from Amy being like, why aren't you speaking to Dave? What's happening? So these are some of the reasons why Dave was messaging me. 1, I wasn't allowed to talk about my pregnancy at the wedding at all, which I get, but I'm also not going to take the limelight. 2, they made it very clear that they weren't going to order any special food for me because I was pregnant. I never asked for this. I was absolutely fine eating what everybody else was eating. Number 3, he was complaining that I wasn't helping him enough, even though he had a best man. He was complaining that I hadn't completed the favours or the seating charts yet, which none of that had been my job. 4, this is my favourite. He said if I was truly a great maid of honour, I would have offered to pay for the bar bill. 5, Dave wanted to approve my maid of honour speech, and he wanted his name to be mentioned as much as Amy's name would be mentioned. I was like, right, babe, well, I don't really know you that much, so you're not being included. And then verbatim, this man told me to just make some stories up. And then he made it very apparent that I wasn't allowed to mention anybody other than the 2 of them in any of my speeches. And there were to be no inside jokes about Amy that didn't include him. 6, he told me I had to keep it together and not let my pregnancy show throughout the whole entire wedding. Also, he wanted me to change the bridesmaid dresses so I wouldn't be matching everybody else's so that my bump couldn't be seen. I was absolutely shocked. So I spoke to Amy about it and she told me to just let it go for now and let it all pass. She distinctly said to not give her any jip because she was the one that had to deal with this behaviour for the rest of her life. So on the day of the wedding, all the bride and the groom do is scold me, berate me, talk down to me. I head down to the bar with Steve to go get a drink and Dave's mum is there and she tells Steve not to get drunk because I've ruined their day enough already. And at that point, I chose violence. I decided that I would be taking home that £300 gift that I decided to give them. I said, so can we all raise a glass? Whilst I quote Amy. I said, I wish you all the luck in the world because you're the one that's going to have to put up with this shite for the rest of your life. And I said, I'll support you through anything, even the divorce. So what do you think? Am I wrong here? Am I the arsehole for telling a pregnant woman to sit on the ground instead of giving up my seat? Story time. My nephews both graduated from high school this morning. We're both really, really close with each other, so I wanted to sit right at the front. I did a bit of an embarrassing thing and I camped out for a little bit of the morning. I just bought my folding camping chair. I watched some little Netflix things whilst I was waiting. So about 40 minutes before the school opened, a pregnant woman came up next to me. She did somewhat push in, but she was with a guy who I am assuming is like her partner. And within 5 minutes of being stood there, she asked me if she could have my chair. And she made it quite clear that she was going to have trouble to stand for the whole time. And I was like, no, sorry, I kind of need it more. For context, I'd had some surgery on both of my knees not too long ago, and then 2 minutes later, she asked me the same thing again. So again, I gave her the same answer. She then asked me every 2 or 3 minutes after that, and I'm not gonna lie, it was getting very, very annoying. Even to the point where she asked her partner to tell me to give up my chair. Like, oh no, her man's asked me now, I must give it up. Oh, weirdo. At this point, I stopped problem solving for this couple, and I'm like, maybe you could go and sit in the car. And this is when her partner just straight up calls me an arsehole. But to be fair, after this, he did just leave me alone. So what do you think? Am I the arsehole here? Am I wrong for refusing to pay for Christmas dinner when I'm not hosting? Story time. So I do Christmas with my husband's family every single year, and each year we change up who is hosting. And I'm pregnant this year, so we decided that my sister-in-law and her partner would host. My partner Steve have always said that they are not the best cook, so we're not really looking forward to the dinner that much. And we did offer to help them with the cooking. They always overcook the vegetables, and there's nothing worse than a rubbery carrot. So despite knowing that I was going to have to politely enjoy the food and not say that I actually really hate it, I was quite looking forward to going until my sister-in-law, who we will call Amy, calls my Steve and asks when we're going to take her shopping to get Christmas groceries. For a little bit of added context here, me and Steve both lost our jobs not too long ago and we're both on food stamps at the moment. And Amy asked if we could have £200 worth of food stamps from our little stash. And please bear in mind that Amy and her family and my Steve's sister are really quite wealthy. Like, they do not need our help. I said, you can tell her, absolutely not. Even if I wanted to help out, I couldn't. I'm pregnant. We need this money for when our baby comes. And also, you're hosting. You pay. Then next thing I know, I've got bloody mother-in-law on the phone asking to give up just like £100 worth of food stamps to help pay for it. Really? Please? Get the vibe. And also, why would I give any money to people who can't cook? It's gonna be a bad meal. They definitely have the means to pay for it themselves as well. And then my mother-in-law dropped the absolute bombshell on me. Darling mother-in-law Sandra turns round to me and says, well, maybe you should give some up because you need to stop eating so much anyway. Bitch, I'm pregnant. She then went on to blabber about how she was upset that she now had to give the £200 and how that was all my fault. So I think now I've just decided that I'm not actually going to go. Like, me and Steve will just stay at our house and we'll just have a cute little day together. But the problem is that Steve really wants to spend Christmas Day with his family, of course. So, should I let bygones be bygones or should I stand my ground here? What do you think? Am I the arsehole for telling my husband that if he fights for custody of his kids, I will divorce him? Story time. So I have never had the desire to have kids. Nor do I feel like I ever will, to be honest. I don't want to have nor care for anyone else's children. So I married my husband, who we will call Steve. And I had absolutely no idea that Steve was a dad until 5 days ago. I'm a self-employed girly, so my wage is really good for the amount of working hours that I have to do. I'm quite flexible in the hours that I work. So in terms of our finances, we have a joint account which all of our bills and like rent and stuff comes out of. Then we have our own separate accounts for fun money and savings. So Steve sat me down about 4 or 5 days ago and said, I haven't been completely honest with you. Great babe, we've only been married for a year or whatever. Steve tells me that he doesn't have one child, he actually has 2 children, when I thought he didn't have any. And the eldest is 10, the youngest is 7. Apparently he's been paying regular child support for them ever since both of them were born. But over the years of paying the child support, this has dipped into his fun money. And now Steve would like some of that fun money to be his again. He doesn't really want to be paying for the kids. He wants to have fun like he sees me have fun. So now his plan is to fight for 50-50 custody because this will mean that he pays less child support. And as I'm sure you can imagine, I was absolutely furious. Like, I'm sorry, how are you about to lie to me about having 2 children? Just bizarre behaviour. So I just outright told him that if he wanted to apply for 50-50 custody, that is absolutely fine, but I would be divorcing him. Not even just because of the kids, like the fact that you lied to me so easily as well. Scary. I haven't tried this foundation before, so this could go very wrong. But we do have a prenup in place, so I would be fully protected. Still get 100% of my business, and I'd get the house because it was mine that was passed down from my grandma. Steve then had the absolute nerve, the gall, bloody gumption to call me the arsehole in this situation. I'm sorry, can anyone see my 2 kids that I never told my life partner about running round? Because I can't. Interesting. He also told me that I would be in the wrong if I didn't step up to be a stepmom. I'm not too sure that is how this works, Steve. He told me that it was time for me to step up so that he could have fun. So realistically, it's not even about getting the kids back. It's about him being able to save money. My parents used my inheritance to buy my stepsister her dream car. Luckily, it ruined their life. Story time. So my life was great when I was a kid. I had a mum and dad that loved me. And I wasn't spoiled, but I never really lacked anything. And overall, it was a very, very healthy childhood. Things turned around when I was 15. So my parents ended up getting a divorce, and by the time I was 17, my mum had already remarried. And in addition to a new stepfather that I didn't want, I got the stepsister that I didn't want either, and she was 14. Obviously call her Amy. And please trust me when I say this is the nicest way I'm going to say this. She is the biggest spoilt brat I have ever come across. I would rather die than be around that little devil. Giving rat. Was and still is one of the most manipulative people I have ever met. She will not stop until she gets what she wants. If there was a toy she wanted growing up, she would scream and cry until she got what she wanted. And then as soon as this got home, she just wouldn't play with it. She'd neglect it, she wouldn't play with it at all. It became very clear that she would just ask for things to prove that she could get them and I couldn't get them. Really knew how to push buttons, let me tell you that. I think as she got older, maybe she gets better. No, she actually just gets worse. Okay, so let's get into the recent events now. For her 18th birthday, she demanded that my parents buy her a new car. But she wouldn't settle for anything small, she wouldn't settle for anything used or secondhand. She wanted something big, something that says, I'm here. She just had to have the new BMW 430i convertible, which if you don't know what that is, it's quite expensive. And initially my parents were like, no, you're not having that, because they just couldn't afford it. But, you know, I've got to give it to Amy. She just does not let things go. Just know that I don't like this eyeshadow look. She made their life a living hell until she got what she wanted. One day, I wake up and this brand new BMW is sat in my parents' driveway. And let me tell you, I was bloody fuming. But to be honest, more than anything, I was just wondering how the hell my parents had afforded this. I hate this eyeshadow so much. Like, my family are by no means rich, and this car costs like over 60 grand, so not really too sure where we're getting this dollar from. So I decided to open the conversation and I asked my mum how she'd been able to afford this for my sister. And this poor woman just literally broke down in front of me. And that was when she told me that she had used my inheritance money to pay for the car. And this was when I decided that this would be the last time my parents were going to prioritise my sister over me. So I'm thinking, girlies, it's revenge time. So I get my sister and my mum and stepdad to come to a fancy little restaurant with me. For a fact, my sister wouldn't come unless we were going somewhere that was expensive. I literally hate this makeup so much. What am I doing? So we're at the restaurant. We're actually having quite a nice time for once. And then I decided that I wanted to speak to my parents and my sister all together about my inheritance. And as soon as I bring it up, Amy gets up and just leaves. Bye. So on the way home, my sister got into a really bad accident in her brand new BMW 430AB, whatever the bloody hell the car's called. The car was a write-off. And since the crash was my sister's fault, my parents, because they were paying for everything, had to pay thousands of pounds in premiums. And it's now been 3 years and my parents are still in debt. Wow, okay, that's makeup. I hate this makeup. So they're still in debt after they sold their house. My sister had to drop out of college, all like not in a good place, and my sister's fallen into some really unhealthy like habits, which I won't go too much into. And at this moment in time, I haven't spoken to them in years, nor do I intend to. No, this is the worst face of makeup I've ever done. I hate every single thing about it and I'm so sorry. Am I the arsehole for wanting to keep an expensive birthday present that makes my boyfriend feel uncomfortable? Story time. So I have just been 25 and I have a friend called Dave who I've been friends with since we were like 8 and 7. And then I also have a boyfriend who we'll call Steve. And me and Steve have been dating for coming up to 9 months now. So last week was my birthday and to celebrate, I had a little dinner with all of my friends and then we went out to a club after. In total, there was about 8 of us and this included Steve and Dave. Just before dessert, we decided that we would do the little gift exchange. And when I opened Dave's present, I found that he had got me an old copy of The Great Gatsby, which is just one of my favourite. This book has such a special meaning for me and Dave. This is because whilst we were growing up, we lived in different countries and we would keep in touch, but we didn't see each other for like 4 years. So we convinced our parents to let me fly out to him so that I could visit him, and we always talked about what we would do when we saw each other. And I mentioned that I really wanted to see The Great Gatsby movie. The film had literally just come out and it was my favourite book, so it just made a lot of sense. I told him that he had to read the book before we went to see it, and to this day, it is the only book that Dave has ever read. And now it's a bit of a running joke because whenever I ask him to do something, he's like, well, I read The Great Gatsby for you, so I may as well do this as well. So we always go big when it comes to birthdays. So the morning after, me and Steve are lying in bed, we both feel a little bit worse for wear, and he turns to me and is like, I really feel like that Great Gatsby book was a really inappropriate gift. And I was like, okay, like, why? Steve was like, because of how expensive it is. And I explained to him that it was just a sentimental gift, there was no need to worry. And Steve was like, but it makes me feel weird that some guy that isn't your boyfriend got you a present that cost more than his car. Bloody hell, how expensive's the book? And also, what kind of car is he driving? This argument went on for the longest time. And Steve was demanding that I return the book. I just screwed up my eyeliner. So Steve was like, I want you to return the book. He said, you can give the book back to Dave, and if it means so much to him and you, he can keep it safe for you. So naturally, I just told Steve to grow up. And now we've been having the same argument on and off for the past week. So Steve is saying that it's more than reasonable for him to be upset by this whole situation. My point is that this is a sentimental gift. And it's not like he got me an expensive piece of jewellery, like a massive showy off necklace or anything like that. Literally just a sentimental gift. He gave me something that had a memory attached to it. That means more to me than Steve's opinion on what an acceptable budget is to spend on your best friend's birthday present. So my mum is trying to convince me to give Steve the benefit of the doubt in this situation. And her advice is to get Dave to look after the book just for now whilst all of this blows over. And then one day, if Steve becomes more secure, I can take it back. My dad thinks that Steve is just being an idiot. And then all of my girls are just completely split on the situation. So what do you think? Am I in the wrong here? Am I the arsehole for yelling at my brother during his daughter's funeral? Story time. So my brother married his high school sweetheart about 10 years ago. But she sadly passed away during childbirth shortly after. He just never recovered from any of this. So because of all of this, he fell into drug addiction, gambling addiction, alcohol addiction, all the addiction, and he became unable to take care of his daughter, who we will call Amy. So since he was unable to take care of Amy, me and my husband took care of her. She came to live with us. She was only about 4 months old when we took her in. Don't get me wrong, we really wanted my brother Steve to be a part of Amy's life, but I'm not gonna lie, he was normally too high to have any clue what was going on. My parents put this guy through rehab so many times, but he relapsed all the time. So we were the ones that saw her first steps, we bought her first bike, we took her to school for the first day. So when Amy was 7, she was diagnosed with stage 3 leukemia. No treatment was too far away, nothing was too expensive. We were willing to try literally everything to get this girl better. And for a short while, all of this treatment worked, but when she turned 8, she relapsed. And this time, it was even worse. And through all of this, my brother Steve only visited his daughter in hospital once. But he didn't come easily. It literally took me, my husband and my parents to force him to go. He saw her, patted her head and then immediately left. And then 3 weeks later, unfortunately, Amy died. So the funeral was 2 weeks later and my brother showed up. And of course, he was high. He was so out of it. Halfway through, he started screaming about how we had taken Amy from him and kept her from him. And even went as far as to say that we were the reason that she'd got sick and that she'd passed away. I get that we're all emotional, but I could not believe that he was this far gone. My dad approached him and tried to calm him down, but he just wasn't letting it go. And at this point, I was sick of my brother getting away with treating people like this. So as my dad was pulling him away, I lost it. Like, what do you mean you're the one that abandoned your daughter? And not even just that, like, he didn't even come and visit her in the hospital while she was dying. I was just so unbelievably hurt in that moment that I just kept going and having a massive go at him. After everything was settled, my mum had a massive go at me and told me that I had ruined the service. And apparently so does most of my family. And my husband just refuses to comment, which I don't know if that makes anything better or worse. So what do you think? Am I wrong here? My boyfriend dumped me the day after he proposed. Too bad I've got the kidney that he needs. Story time. So my boyfriend Steve and I had the perfect relationship, to the point where people said that we were the reason people believed in love at first sight. Before Steve proposed, we had always spoken about the fact that we would probably have a long engagement so that we could save money, and we also wanted to be in a better place financially, career-wise, all that sort of thing. He got into a terrible car accident. It was genuinely awful. A drunk driver hit him head on. This guy was driving the wrong way up the road and just smacked straight into Steve's car. So I obviously ran to the hospital as soon as I heard what had happened. They operated on this man for 12 hours and they said if they hadn't have got to him in time, it wouldn't have saved his life. And when he came out of theatre, the doctors said that he would need a kidney transplant. And I was there with Steve's parents, and we all knew that at least one of us would be able to give him a kidney. We started testing that day to find out who would be the perfect match for Steve. And strangely enough, it came back that I was the better match than his parents. So I was like, great, when am I being cut open? When can my guy have a kidney? They made it very clear that they didn't want to operate straight away. They wanted Steve to build up a bit of strength still. So they confirmed that the operation will be done in 6 months. So let's fast forward a little bit now. Steve got better and he said that the accident made him realise that I was the one. He really wanted to get married, so he proposed. It was great. So the next day I come home from work, I expect to see Steve on the sofa, relaxing, recuperating, because, you know, he did get smashed into by a drunk driver like a couple of months ago, but apparently Steve's got better things to be doing. And at this point, I was really starting to panic. Steve couldn't get around too well on his own still. He needed a lot of support and help. So I'm running around the house stressing, and I decide that it's probably best to call Steve's parents to see if they know where he is. I decided it's probably best to ring his parents, and his mother answered, Sandra, we love her mother-in-law. Tell me for why this woman is screaming at me. Alexandra, please calm your tits, you're going to stake someone's eye out. And she proceeds to tell me that Steve doesn't want to speak to me. And at that point, my heart sank. I spent the next few days barely sleeping. I was tossing and turning all night trying to work out what happened. I cared for him whilst he was sick. And let's not forget the fact that I literally offered this man my kidney. Baffling behaviour from Steve. So finally, one day the phone rings. Beep, 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 it's Steve. He goes on to explain that the accident had made him realise that even though he really loves me, he doesn't actually want to spend the rest of his life with me. And the insults started. This man is calling me all sorts of names. He's calling me lazy, unattractive, unhygienic. And then just to add insult to injury, he called me boring. I could not believe what I was hearing. My guy literally wanted to marry me yesterday, so what's happened? He also then asked if we could still be friends, which, like, no. And then the line dropped. He asked if it would still be okay to borrow my kidney. Call me old-fashioned, but no ring. No kidney. That has only told me that his family had already told him about the fact that they weren't a good match and I was really the only good match for him, both in life and in kidney. But I just flat out told him no. I will not be donating my kidney to you, Steve. Sorry. And at that point he started crying. And before I could hear any more of the sob story, I hung up on him. So what do you think? Am I the arsehole? Am I the arsehole for uninviting my sister-in-law who is in love with my husband? Story time. So my husband and I met each other at ski lodge about 9 years ago. We'll call him Steve. I was with my friends, my sister and my children, and he was with his brothers and sisters and a couple of his friends as well. We'd been talking throughout the night, and my friends and his friends set us up so we'd have to sing together. It was very High School Musical vibes. And even at this point, I could catch on to my sister-in-law's disturbing behaviour. After we had done our little song, we went to the cafe to have a little chat afterwards to get to know each other a bit more. The middle sister, who we'll call Amy, came storming up to us. And for some context, Amy was adopted at birth, so she's not a biological sister at all. She was demanding that he return back to their group. She didn't look at me once and then whined when he told her no. She actually ran off crying and then locked herself in the room, so everybody else in that room had to stay in someone else's room. It was quite the inconvenience. Fast forward to when we bought a house together. We invited our friends and family, and of course Amy was there. But she turned up wearing this like a really skimpy, sexy little clubbing outfit to a housewarming party with friends and family. She literally ignored me the whole entire time and hung off my husband the whole time. She kept kissing him on the cheek, hugging him. She touched his arm whenever he made her laugh. This girl was flirting with her own brother. People commented about how she looked like the girlfriend and I looked like some random girl. She was going around telling everybody about how he'd always said that he didn't want kids, but now he's changed his tune and is playing daddy to my daughter. She even went as far as to talk about how hot his modelling pictures were from when he'd done them in college. And if you think this is bad, things got even worse at the end of the night. This was the night when Steve proposed to me. And as soon as he got down on one knee, this bitch started crying and she ran to the bathroom. Their dad went to go check on her and then he ended up driving her straight home. After that, we didn't see her for years. She skipped our wedding, she skipped the baby shower for our new baby, she skipped family parties. I was absolutely fine inviting her to stuff because I knew she wouldn't actually turn up. She ended up having some sort of mental breakdown and was in and out of treatment for years after this. I wish this girl all the best, but I don't want her disrupting my peace. I just really hope that she gets well again. So, I'm currently pregnant and our baby shower is at the end of this month. So, my mother-in-law RSVP'd and said that Amy would actually be coming this time and asked if it was okay if she could bring her new boyfriend. And I'm not gonna lie, I was a little bit apprehensive to agree. Well, it took all of 24 hours after this for her to start her old ways. She was texting my husband paragraphs at like 3 a.m. talking about how I destroyed the family and how I'd ruined their relationship. She was asking if he really was happy with his life because he had always said that he didn't want kids, but after I came along, he kind of changed his mind. She then was asking if he had ever thought about her this whole time when they'd not been speaking. That was the last straw for me. I asked him if he was aware of the fact that his sister was in love with him. And Steve had just shrugged his shoulders and said, well, I don't really doubt your theory. He opened up about the fact that when they were 11, she had asked him if they could cuddle and kiss. And he obviously said no. He admitted that since then, her behaviour had always been a little bit strange and dramatic. I then asked him if he would uninvite her for the baby shower because I was convinced that this girl was going to bring all the drama and I was not in the mood. And he said that he needs to speak to his parents first to see what type of state she's in. So what do you think? Am I the arsehole for telling my ex-boyfriend's new girlfriend to stop treating me like a surrogate? Story time. So I was with this guy called Steve for 3 months before he decided he was going to go back to his ex, who I'll call Amy. Wow, that's a lot. So just after we broke up, I found out that I was pregnant and I was 24 weeks along. I told Steve about it, he was over the moon, and it turned out that Amy couldn't have kids due to some health situations that she was going through. And I knew that Steve had always wanted to be a dad, so I knew that this would mean a lot to him. We decided that we wouldn't get back together and he would stay with Amy. Anyway, we found out on our first scan that I was actually having twins. He told Amy and Amy did not take this news well. So one day I get a text from Amy and she's like, please can you come over to our place? And she said that she'd really like to be a part of the pregnancy as much as possible because she would eventually be stepmom to the twins. She decided that she wanted to give me advice on how to have a home birth, a certain way to feed the babies, and what they would want to call her when they came. I was a little bit shocked by all of this because I was like, oh, my pregnancy, like my birth, I'll make my own choices. So I decided it'd be best to leave. She didn't stop though. She texted me every day asking what I was eating, how much I was exercising, what I was doing at work. She even joined a genetics counselling meeting with me and tried to make it all about her family history. Look, I'm not too really sure how you think this works, Amy, but there's none of your DNA going on here. And when it was time for a really important scan, Steve wanted Amy to come with me instead of him. But I was like, no. At this meeting, I found out the gender and I shared it on my social media, as everybody does. But then Amy posted a pregnancy announcement about how she was going to have babies, just in a different way. And this really flipping bothered me, but of course I didn't really want to say anything. Amy even went as far as to have a gender reveal party for herself and she put it online. But I hadn't been invited to this gender reveal. She is even planning a baby shower. I was getting really wound up, so I commented on her post telling her to stop treating me like I'm a surrogate, and I very much reminded her that the children would not be hers when they arrived. I then messaged Steve and I was like, listen, I'm not going to come round again because I need to sort some things out legally here because this woman is scaring me. And that now Steve would not be invited to the birth and my mum would be my only birthing partner. Now Steve and Amy's parents are calling me names, so what do you think? Am I wrong here? Am I the arsehole for not wanting to pay my mother-in-law for a gift that I didn't ask for? So one day I came over and my mother-in-law was round and she told me that she had bought me a new coffee machine. I don't know why, I didn't ask for one. And the one I have is still working absolutely fine. But listen, I thought, hey, new coffee machine, I won't turn it down. We sat for a few hours, we had a coffee from the coffee machine, and then when she was leaving, she was like, oh, just one thing. She told me that I needed to pay her the extra £30 for the coffee machine. I was like, Sandra, I'm not really too sure what you're talking about there. She was like, well, I really only planned to get you a gift that cost £50, so because I spent £30 extra, you should really pay that. Sandra is truly a girl math queen. Now, I don't know about you, but this confused me a little bit. If she had planned on only spending £50 and the cheapest coffee machine she could find was £80, why didn't she just get me something that cost £50? Because I'd like to remind everybody, I didn't want a coffee machine. She was saying how she didn't really care if she paid more and it was really about me being happy. But babe, like, you do care because you're now asking me for money. She was like, oh, you know, it's just a matter of principle, really. She was like, really, if you had any manners, you would just pay me instead of arguing with me. She then left, quite swiftly. She later texted my husband and was like, oh yeah, by the way, I'm still waiting for that 30 quid that she's not sent. She told him that if I didn't pay her, she would take back the coffee machine. So I told Steve to tell his mother that she can come and collect it. Because nowhere am I giving someone 30 quid for a present that I didn't want. My husband is not okay with the coffee machine being taken back. Just wait till you hear why. My husband says that he doesn't want it to go back because he has become attached to the coffee machine. Well, I suggest you unattach yourself, Steve. And I was like, okay, babe, well, if you want to keep the coffee machine, you can pay the 30 quid. He then starts telling me that I am making this harder than it needs to be. And now I'm having a really hard time seeing how I'm in the wrong here, so please do let me know if I've missed something. Can I just give his mum the 30 quid like she's asked and be done with it? Am I the arsehole for calling my daughter's dad spineless and his girlfriend creepy after what they decided to call their daughter? Story time. So, a little bit of context. I ended up falling pregnant with my daughter on a drunken hookup. I know it's not very glamorous, but that's the truth of it all. When we found out that I was pregnant, we decided that we would keep the baby and we would co-parent as friends. We were never a couple, nor did we want to be. 4 years ago, Steve met a girl called Amy and they ended up moving in together this time last year. She fell pregnant very quick and I've been extremely supportive where I can be. I've had a big chat with my daughter about it. I've told her that she needs to help out wherever necessary and to behave while she's there so that she's not making their life any more stressful. I also mentioned that I'd love our children to have a really close relationship despite having different mothers. I'm actually really happy that my daughter is getting a sibling because I didn't want any more children, so this kind of works out for the best. So 3 days ago, Amy gave birth. And Steve texted me asking if I could bring our daughter to meet her. So of course I did exactly that. But then they introduced us to the baby. I was shocked. The name they used was my daughter's name. I'm done. I'm out. So Amy, the mum, didn't seem to have any sort of issue. She didn't think to let me know. We didn't have a conversation about it. But Steve, the dad, seemed very, very uncomfortable. And he wouldn't even look me in the eye. So I was like, what are we playing at here? What's going on? At that point, Steve's dad was like, I'll take the daughter out. We'll go to the cafe. He was like, peace out, tap it out. Steve told me to not overreact about the situation and to calm down. While Amy, with the audacity, turned around and said, I don't really see what the problem is. It was just a pretty name that we liked. Original. And I was trying to work out if they'd named the child after my daughter. And Amy was like, nah, it was just a pretty name that we both really liked. Well, no shit, you really liked. You've already got a daughter named that, weirdo. And I was really trying to wrap my brain around this. I was like, great, so what are we going to use as like her nickname? Like, is she going to go by her middle name? Like, what's going on? I very quickly just came to the realisation that this was the name and they didn't see anything wrong with it at all. This is the most mad Steve and Amy have ever moved. I'm calling it right now. And that was when I turned to Amy. I was like, you're a creep. Steve tried to interject and like break it up. And I was like, you can't get involved. You are a spineless man. He then tried to tell me that our daughter could go by a nickname instead. Amy then called me a bitch and then asked the nurses to remove me. I got kicked out of the hospital. So what do you think here? Am I the arsehole?